Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for staying longer. I believe that towards the end it gets even better. Well, my name is David Okelo, as you can see. I'm from Kenya. I'm not going to take so much of the time because I carefully chose the topic of my discussion today to be what we call the African dilemma. The reason being that all the speakers that have come before me and the presenters are talking the same language. But in my opinion, what is there today, for example, in the African community, which by extension is the African continent, and other parts of the Asian continent and South America, is what we call the dilemma. Why do I refer to it as a dilemma? All these countries are seeking, they're looking for a way to exit the imperialistic effects and the imperialistic lifestyle and the imperialistic culture that had been planted in them 60, 40, 30, 70 years ago. So my discussion today is not about the history. It's about what we have today in this present day and hour. For example, I'm going to bring Kenya to buttress what I'm talking about, what I want to discuss here, or simply to demonstrate that it is a dilemma. And when I talk about this, I will get back to probably when Kenya got independence in the year 1962. Then power was handed to the founding father of the nation called Mzee Jomo Kenyatta. And now that the British exited, in a way, some people still want to think that they're around, but in my opinion, they're not. Kenyans are now there to rule themselves. But we have now decided to be the imperialists ourselves. Why do I say so? Because when the founding president left, he left when he had annexed almost over 500,000 acres of land from this country. And many people from the coastal part of Kenya, that is the part that is bordering the Indian Ocean and Mombasa, those who may be familiar with Kenya, today they are squatters in Kenya. They don't have so much land because that land belongs to the first family and the founding family of the country. As it may be, after he was living, so he looked around and then again picked up somebody else who he thought was going to protect his dynasty. And then to me, that is the modern day imperialism. It is the modern day colonization that now still exists within the African community. And what does it mean? It means that it's a pandemonium. It's pandemonium. It is a strange thing that we are struggling to see how to end, but we can't. So again, the successive leaders who have come in have followed in the same footsteps. They have either connived to take large tracts of land and left many Kenyans landless, or they have established companies that are almost dominating almost everything. If you move to every sector, as a matter of fact, as we speak today, the current president of Kenya is the son of the first founding president. And he controls basically almost all the sectors of the economy. You can find his hand and foot almost in every industry, in every factory, in every company. So what we're talking about now here is that, how do we get out of this? I think it is not going to be fair at this present hour and day to continue probably discussing this in a way that wants to blame either the West or the Europeans. Because yes, you colonized us, or the British colonized Kenya, for example, in this case, but they handed over power. And I have never seen them coming back now to dictate to us what we need to do. But rather, we have decided now to run back to them. Of course, somebody would argue that now we don't have resources. Then all the resources went with the Europeans. But it is also a subject of discussion another day. But in my own opinion, I think, for example, in the case of Kenya, we've got all that it takes to shape the destiny of that country. And I think we've got all that it takes now to sit down and say that, yes, it happened, We cannot continue mourning and complaining forever. Kindly move me to the next step. I'm just going to, because this is very brief, but this is just a brief background. I don't have so many slides. I don't want to be boring. This is just to tell you that during the occupation by the British in Kenya, Kenyans were fighting back to gain their independence and freedom. And this is called Mau Mau movement. It was happening the year between 1920, running all the way up to 1960, thereabouts. And after Kenya achieved its independence, then the same fighting group now became an enemy of themselves. So now they're fighting for power, fighting for resources, and fighting for dominance. And again, that is now again how the issue of the first founding president allocating himself 3 tracts of land came up, because now again he was now trying to find a way of controlling his comrades or his colleagues. So that is briefly this is just to demonstrate to you that we also had we also had to fight back, but that was then. So kindly move me to the next step. Now I think if you ask me, in the present hour and day, imperialism only resides in a bit of these things. That either it is for economic interest, that some countries want to invest. But again, because sometimes we are a divided house, they come and they find that rules can be bent to favor them. So they will invest at the expense of the locals and gain that economic power over the locals, and then continue to control them, because we all know that nowadays the physical war shifted to the economic war. And now whoever dictates how much loan they can give, for example, the Chinese have now taken over Africa, most parts of Africa, because they have come with a loaning system that is appealing, but also killing at the very end. So again, if you look at, this is about politics and power. Yes, we know that as a matter of fact, human beings like people who are loyal to them. And whoever has power has a way of controlling others, and has a way of controlling resources, and has a way of controlling the way people do things. And therefore, it is not abnormal that some of these stable, huge countries always want to see that sometimes that the people that they prefer are in power. But again, I think, for example, in the case of Kenya today, we are facing a general election in the next 2 months, and the competition is very stiff. I've seen the top contenders running to UK and to the US to claim themselves, to show how good they are, to sell their policies. And to me, this is also speaks to the fact that imperialism now has now turned tables. It now comes from our end to Europe. It comes from our end to the Western countries, because I wonder why they cannot just sell their policies to the common man down in the country, who actually will either benefit or lose, depending on their policies. But this is happening because the UN affiliated bodies, the World Bank, the IMF, you call them, they have these economic ultimatums and sanctions, which make sure that in one way or the other, you would have to come and embrace yourself. So in a way, it continues. Social and cultural influence, of course. You meet 20 young people today in Kenya and you ask them, how is life in the village? They will tell you it is boring. We want to be in the city where we can dress like the Europeans and the Americans. And then you wonder, okay, now, what is now happening to our own cultural dressings? What is now going to happen to our own way of speaking and doing things? And so a lot is changing. But again, it is a fact that we have to accept that I think this is about globalization. We cannot stop it. We just have to struggle to find our space and see how to fit into that. you look at, and that's why this is a very open question at the very end, that who should then take the blame? I think nobody should actually take the blame. The blame is as good as what are you doing with this health? And so I think that, for example, my country, if they decide to fail the development of the country, the peace of the country, the stability, then they have to take the blame. We don't need to shift the blame to anybody else. And they move to the next one. And here I put Kenyan independence with a question mark again, because we have somehow political independence with economic domination still continuing. And most of the large industries in Kenya, factories and companies that employ millions of people, they are not, very few of them can be counted to be owned entirely or 50% by Kenyans. They either belong to the Indians or the Chinese or the Europeans or the Americans. And so whoever pays the piper plays the tune. So since we don't have that economic power and we're not sitting on that economic seat, therefore we can say that somebody somewhere still has a way of continuing the imperialistic attitude and practices within our society. But again, now we have taken it up by ourselves and we are practicing it ourselves. And I will end my presentation at that. It was that simple, that brief, because I felt that this is not something new. We all know what it means, and what we needed to do here is just to highlight a few things and discuss the rest. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you. They were very good talks about neocolonialist control and systems. But now we have time to have one last question. Yes.
Hello, my name is Edward. Thank you for the presentation. My question is, can you say what is the sense? I like that some people from Kenya, they wear bracelets with flag of the country, and it's very good. It's inspiring me to do the same. So what is the sense of this? Is it so that, is it like by mistake, I saw that people from Kenya, they wear in their hand bracelet with the flag of the country, or it's really like that, they do it massively? Yes.
Well, thank you. That's very interesting. I think there may be 3 or 4 ways of responding to your question. One, that bracelet bears the colors of our country's flag. So to some people, it is a true show of patriotism, loyalty to the country and love for the country. And to some people, it is just a matter of fashion, because our head of state also puts it. So we can put it and show around. And one thing I've also realized is that once Kenyans have traveled abroad elsewhere, which is not home, then they start cherishing Kenyan things more than they would cherish when they're at home. So yes.
So, more questions? Or are everybody just waiting to get it? Luca, you got trust.
I think it's important to see that something what happens before name of imperialism and colonialism happens now using money and legalized system and universal institutions, and oppression is the same. It's only hiding in the system and it is legalized. So it's I don't think Kenyan people can choose freely because all depends about money and invest. and who have money, he can control the world. And he usually have also influence in universal institutions and like you said, where there are World Trade Organization and EMF and UNICEF and United Nations and things like that.
Thank you. It was very interesting, and I think you are right that sometimes we forget the responsibility of African peoples themselves in each country. That, of course, how they arrange the political system, like you said, that of course who's to blame is not so simple question. But of course, at the same time. We do have to recognize the neo-colonial development, and Finland certainly is kind of on the top countries that we gain a lot of goods and surplus from African countries and Asian countries and South American countries. So certainly, I think if it's primarily the responsibility of the Kenyan people to rearrange your political system, I think also the Finnish people should assist Kenyan people in that, that we have that responsibility too. And so it's a complicated thing, but like very important man, Mao Zedong said that the internal contradictions of anything is always the most determining factor. So the people in each country, of course, will be the ultimate decider of the fate of that country. And while the Finnish people should assist Kenyan people, of course, we should remember that we have to, the Finnish working class should keep our own government out of the power to establish a different political system.
Coming from Tanzania, I think I have a different take from what you just said. It might sound a little bit contradictory from my stance when I give my presentation. When Kenya got independence, it went a capitalistic way. They became capitalists, full-blown capitalists, and everybody just went up for grabs. Tanzania, on the other hand, went the socialists. The socialists, and we paid a heavy price for it. Our first president was keen about making sure that everybody sort of benefited from the spoils of the land. He invested a lot on the education of the common man, the free education and things like that. But then, when Idi Amin attacked us, and then our economy sort of wobbled, we were told in no uncertain terms, like you have to liberalize your economy. So there was no way we could survive on the same roots of socialism, whereby everybody took care of everybody else without the help of the West. And this was the total West. I mean, the World Bank, the IMF, the Nordic countries, everybody told the Tanzanians, like, you have to sort out your economy and open up your economy to businesses and denationalize your properties. And so we do not have the same kind of issue that you had in Kenya. But in Kenya, you were everybody's blue-eyed boy. Everybody laughed because it was people who come, people who invest and everything, and that's a system that you're chosen. But what I'm trying to say is that it is a little bit disingenuous say to put all the responsibility on the Africans for the method we are. In some countries, when they got independence, I think it was the French, I think it was Togo, the French removed even the ballots. In Tanzania, when we got independence, there were only about 3 engineers in the whole country. So we come from a very, very low level, and I think it should be given credit for that. But the thing is, we are all responsible, but we cannot make it without support or without understanding from the rest of the world. And expecting Africans or Kenyans or Tanzanians by themselves to sort of their mess, it won't happen.
Always wanting the loans to be paid as interest.
Yeah, the loan to pay with super interest.
Yeah, I think this takes us like full circle again to, you know, like what I did say earlier, you know, the point you made about the internal, you know, like when you talked about the fact that the African leaders themselves, you know, started being imperialistic towards the fellow African. Of course, that's the way it looks like, but then there is always these unseen hands, you know, pulling the strings, you know, from outside the nation. Just like what I said earlier, there are always those that are willing to be used. And when any African leader becomes very focused to make the changes, you will never last. Just look back to history. In so many countries, you know, even without mentioning facts, you know, we know exactly what happens to such leaders. Okay, let's take for instance the case of you know, Burkina Faso. See how they dealt with that guy. You know, down the line, all the way from the movement down the line. If you try it, they will surely use somebody to get it out of the way. This is exactly how it works. And then it so happens that most you know, intra-African politics is not the type where people trust each other or can work together. This is where we would not be able to have, like, you know, good economy. For instance, we talk about Francophone, we talk about Anglophone, you know, then like in West Africa, they can work together. If you have to travel out, you know, like, you know, you can't even fly from Lagos to Dakar, you know. You even have to fly out to Spain or to Paris before you get back to Dakar. You know, these are the kind of things that really makes this whole thing very, you know, very sad and difficult to understand, because there are hands that have messed up this thing. I'm not trying to say that the you know, the Africans themselves are not fair, but the point is that it almost seems impossible for this thing to work out, and that's why I explained a kind of you know, thought that this whole thing is kind of you know, I'm kind of, you know, pessimistic about any possibility of any positive changes coming from this, unless, you know, some miracle happens.
You want to some answer, then we can maybe.
Oh, yes, I want to respond just very briefly to, yes, I really value your comments and thoughts on this, but again, remember, the discussion was that some of the African countries gained their independence 60, 70 years ago. And as much as we want to believe that there's some unseen hands still pulling strings, yes, we know they are. Even Finland is not free of that. They are also in one way or the other controlled by the bigger states.
Global
But-
business.
But what we have to say is that it is now time for the African nation, the African continent, to stand on its feet. And so that we don't get this an excuse for even the simplest things that we can have. That is my take. And for example, Tanzania, where my brother Humphreys comes from, he says that it was almost impossible that they could survive alone. While I want to disagree, because in the recent times, we had President John Pombe Magufuli, who actually elevated the Tanzanian infrastructure to very good levels. And I think if it is not for the media hype, maybe I may be wrong or not, but if I followed him properly, he was the first African president to decline the Chinese loan. And he said, we can do it with the Tanzanians' taxpayers. Again, when the COVID pandemic came in, he said, no, before we accept masks from elsewhere, let us try our own, made from home. I mean, such leaders are there. They need courage. They need to be applauded, because I think even the countries that we want to cherish, that we still want to call colonial masters, they started from somewhere. Finland was colonized by Sweden.
Yep.
Russia is also here.
Yeah.
That in one way or the other, you have to find a space and say, this is what is finished and this is what is not finished. So thank you very much for your observations. That was my wrapping up, just to add on to what my brothers have contributed.